What up? I'm Bea and welcome to my channel where we talk about all things YouTube drama and current events. Today we're going to be having a bit of a chat about the rise in popularity of true crime related content, my thoughts on it, and why the amount of true crime content that I consume and true crime creators that I follow has dramatically decreased over the past few months. Now, if you've watched me for a while, some of you may remember that when I first started my channel, I did, YouTube drama and commentary videos like I do now, but I also used to do a series of videos called Crafty Crimes videos where I sat down, talked about a true crime case, and did some crocheting at the same time. And I really did enjoy those videos, but I stopped doing them a few months ago. They were something that I really enjoyed making and a core group of people enjoyed watching, but overall they didn't do as well as commentary videos on my channel. And as, I don't know, taboo or weird as it may feel to discuss it, YouTube is something that people hope to make money from. So it's kind of like a business. I feel weird saying it because my channel is still on the younger side and we're growing, but I have a full-time job. This isn't my only source of income. It's weird to say like, oh, this is my business, but essentially one day I hope that it will be. And so in thinking like that and thinking of the best way to have your channel perform well, make money, stuff like that, sometimes you have to make decisions of whether or not you're going to continue a certain kind of content or where the direction of your channel is going to go. And so I made the decision to put those crafty crime videos on the back burner and focus more on current events and commentary style videos. And for the most part, it was well received. I do still have people who watched the videos as I was making them come back and ask, when are you going to make another Crafty Crimes? Or sometimes new people will find my channel through one of my videos about true crime and they'll be really excited for it, only to kind of realize that I don't do that kind of content anymore. And I think it is a bit disappointing for them. So it does make me feel a little bit bad when people ask about it. It's good because I know that people enjoyed it, even if it wasn't the type of content that did the best on my channel. Knowing that people still liked it does feel good, but it also feels bad to know that somebody liked something that I can no longer give them. And because of that, they also might not want to watch my channel, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. And honestly, I've toyed around with the idea of making a Crafty Crimes video every now and then, just bringing it back every few weeks or so the people who really enjoyed them could watch them. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt kind of wrong to me. It felt like I would be using really terrible things that happen to other people as a way to keep subscribers. So ultimately I decided that for now, for the season that my channel is currently in, we're not doing Crafty Crimes. That's not a kind of content that I feel comfortable making. However, just because I stopped making true crime content here doesn't mean that I stopped consuming true crime content altogether. I've always been completely fascinated by true crime, and if you talked to me 6 months ago, I would have given you at least a dozen true crime content creators that I loved. There were so many YouTube channels and podcasts that I listened to at least once a week because I just love the genre so much. But over the past few months, I've noticed two things. First, when you are creating YouTube content and it's your hobby, it takes a lot of time, so you don't necessarily have as much time to watch YouTube. Before my hobby was watching YouTube because I love it so much. Now it's moved on to making content for YouTube, so you don't have as much time and you have to be a little bit more discerning with the content that you watch. You have to prioritize it. But the other reason was because I just felt myself becoming very disenchanted with a lot of the people who used to be some of my favorite creators. I started doing some digging in my noggin and came up with a list of some pretty valid reasons, I think, as to why I've lost interest in these specific creators. And I'm not going to name any names. As always, this isn't meant to be a hateful video. It's not meant to say, you suck, you suck, you suck, you're terrible, you're doing all of these things, and so you're the worst. That's not my gig. That's not how I like to approach things. It is just a conversation about things that I've noticed, and I definitely want to hear your opinions too when we're done. Alright, so the first reason that I have a problem with a lot of today's true crime content creators is because a lot of them are doing it because it's popular right now. If you look back to any point in history, you can almost certainly find at least some indication that people were interested in crime or criminal activity or notorious criminals. I think a big part of it is just human nature, being curious about things and being interested in darkness. And when it comes to like serial killers and stuff like that, so many of us couldn't even comprehend thinking the way that they do, and so we're just fascinated. We just are, and we always have been. This used to be a really common thing. I'm sure people still do it, but we don't necessarily see it as often. But people used to go and make a day out of watching active crime scene investigations. They would peek around the police, hope to see like an arm or a murder weapon. They would be fascinated by it. People would take pictures and sell them. People still sell true crime memorabilia. Whenever the home of a very famous serial killer goes up for sale or goes back on the market, people talk about it. People have always been fascinated in true crime, but on YouTube and kind of in the social media sphere, in the content creator sphere, I feel like different genres each have their day. We have little peaks and valleys, and sometimes the kind of content you want to make just isn't flourishing, and sometimes it is. And right now we are in a time where true crime content is flourishing. It's very profitable, and I think sometimes people will recognize that it is a profitable field and go into it to make money. Which again, there's nothing wrong with doing a job to make money, but it just kind of rubs me the wrong way when I can listen to somebody and tell that that's the only reason they're doing it. As a creator, you get to choose whatever you want to make your content about. And so if you've chosen to talk about this, I expect the people that I watch to at least have empathy and compassion and actually have somewhat of a heart for the people who were involved and be able to empathize, and maybe not empathize, but like sympathize, and not let the cases or the sadness from the cases overtake them, but I want to know that they feel it a little bit, that they understand how horrifying the things that they're talking about actually are, and that they care about it, instead of just, well, true crime content is popular, I can make a lot of money from it, let's just roll with this. The second problem I have with a lot of true crime content creators today is that they have a habit of making light of very serious topics. In the past, especially on Twitter, I have seen a lot of criticism that's very similar to this. A lot of it that I have seen has been directed towards people like Bailey Sarian, who do their makeup while they talk about a true crime case. And I don't agree with that criticism being directed towards people who do things like that, as long as they are taking it seriously and not talking about it like it's just, let me tell you about my experience at the mall last week. If they're giving the true crime stories the respect that they deserve and doing a good job telling it, I don't have a problem with that. Bailey has said multiple times that it's just something to do with her hands, and I feel like probably a lot of other people who make those same style videos feel the same way, or some of them probably saw how well that series has done for Bailey Sarian and are trying to make it work like that for themselves, which you do you, I guess. So I don't have a problem with that. What I am talking about, however, is the people who, like I made in the first point, don't care about the impact of the cases that they are talking about. These creators are talking about some of the most traumatic, horrifying disgusting things that could have ever been done to another human being. And when they just kind of make light about it or talk about these things like they are no big deal, and you can really tell that they aren't processing how horrifying what they're actually talking about is, it bothers me. And there's something called vicarious trauma that is a very real thing. If you've never heard of that, it's something that in a lot of cases can affect people who talk about really dark things, or people who, a lot of times it happens with interpreters, like language interpreters. So if you are bilingual in Spanish and English and you're interpreting a court case and you have to hear what happened to somebody and then interpret it into the other language, you almost have to kind of process that trauma as you're hearing it, and it can have a big effect on your life. And so that's a legitimate thing. It is real. Researching and talking about terrible, terrible things can take a toll on you. So I understand that people who talk about them have to be kind of desensitized. You can't let every single case you talk about just tear your heart apart, because then you couldn't make the content. So I don't expect these people to like come on camera or do the podcast and just be crying about terrible things that happened. But I need to see that you understand the seriousness of what you're talking about. And this also applies to people who do more lighthearted true crime podcasts. That sounds like such an oxymoron to me, but there are people who do it well, and I respect the people who do a good job at it. But there are a lot of those comedy true crime channels or true crime podcasts who make jokes about everything, and who go off topic and talk about how this relates to them and this funny thing, and they make a joke. And so I get that you're doing a comedy show, and sometimes stories are really heavy and you need some comedic relief, and that's why the genres go together. Yes, at the end of the day, your podcast or your YouTube channel is there to entertain your audience, but at the same time, those stories need to be given the respect that they deserve, which leads us into the third point. The third problem with a lot of true crime content creators today is that they don't do the research. I feel like this is a criticism that I shouldn't have to give anybody who creates content based on facts, but here we are. Obviously, if you're watching a creator who talks about current crimes or things that are in the process of being investigated, they can't have all the facts. It's impossible to know. Like, they may engage in some speculation, or if it's like multiple people hosting the podcast, someone might ask a question and the person who's telling the story could say, I don't know, that hasn't come out yet, or I wasn't able to find it. And that's totally fine. If you are talking about things that are currently happening and currently being investigated, you can't have all of the details. But when you were talking about more notorious cases, or cases that have a ton of information available if you just do the digging or do the research for them, like when that information is available to you and you, as a creator whose job this is, do not look for it, don't do the due diligence, and you miss key parts of the story because you just didn't feel like watching a second documentary. I don't love to say this, but it's disgusting. I will extend a bit of grace and understanding to smaller content creators, people who are doing this for a hobby, who still have an outside job, and they're just trying to make a name for themselves in the true crime world. Time is limited, resources are limited, so in some cases, for some of those people, like I said, I will give you the grace of saying, well, maybe once you have more time to dedicate to this, it will get better. But I have seen people who started out really small and started out doing this as a hobby who still did incredibly thorough research. And so while I am kind of giving the understanding to those creators, I know it's possible. I know it's hard. It takes a lot of time to do research on these cases, but it is possible, even if you are doing this by yourself in your free time. When it comes to people who make their income, like their main source of income from their channel or from their podcast, there's really no excuse. You know, one of the benefits of being a social media content creator is that you do get to choose the standard of your content, and you get to choose how much time you spend researching, or how much time you spend prepping for a video, how much time you spend filming, XYZ, like all of that is up to you, so that is a benefit. But I feel like if you are making true crime content, the least you can do is be thorough with your research. It just feels kind of gross to me that somebody who has their main source of income coming in from talking about these kinds of things, like the most terrible things that could ever happen to a human, or like the worst time somebody's ever been through, or somebody who is seriously mentally ill and committed a series of crimes because they didn't have proper treatment. You know, you're talking about all these terrible things. It just feels so incredibly disrespectful to me, and I will never be okay supporting the kind of content creator who watches one episode of Disappeared from Investigation Discovery and thinks that that's all the info from the case. They take their notes from that and they present it like it's the research that they've done. It's not okay in my book. And for the fourth and final problem I have with some content creators in this genre is the excuse of, well, this is just a comedy show, or we're not experts, when they are met with criticisms very similar to the ones that I've laid out in the video. This often happens when they are doing riffing, like at the beginning of a video or at the beginning of a show, talking about how they got some mean comment or some bad review for the last show because they didn't know something, or they made too many jokes, or they didn't go into enough detail. Oh, you know, why would they want us to do that? We're just a comedy show. We're just a podcast. We're just a YouTube channel. Like, we're not experts. We didn't go to college for this. We're just everyday people. And so if this video by chance makes its way to any of the people who I'm talking about, or the kinds of creators who would, I don't know, deserve this sort of criticism, I want to ask if you're okay with this statement of, well, this is for entertainment anyway. Are you okay acknowledging that you don't take this as seriously, or you don't do as much research as you know that you could? Are you okay using the story of someone's life in that manner? And if so, you might want to reevaluate if that's something that you're proud of. And like I said, I've seen people do this well. Last podcast on the left, prime example in my opinion of a show that is a true crime comedy podcast. They understand that talking about things in depth, talking about very notorious criminals or events, cults, stuff like that, it takes some dedication and it takes some real research, and they literally have a research team now. They didn't have one when they first started because it was three guys who were friends who wanted to start a podcast, but they have a research team now. And even though they have that team, two of the creators, the ones who put together the timeline and the notes, they still do readings on the cases. There's a third guy there, Ben Kissel, y'all know. He's just kind of there as like a facilitator of the story. He kind of plays the audience member role of like, oh, well, what about this? Did you look into this? Did that happen? But Henry and Marcus, they still do research despite having a team, and they know that they can't pump out deep dives every single week and still give the stories the respect that they deserve. Again, their podcast is very funny. They make tons of jokes all the time, but none of it is ever at the expense of the victim, which some other content creators do. And at the end of the day, they know that they're talking about serious topics, and they treat them as such. They'll do a series of between like 2 and 6 episodes on one topic, and then in between those, you know, when they're in between one series and another, they'll do side stories where it's just like, these are crazy things that happened in the news this week. So I think that that kind of scheduling model works really well, and I think it could benefit a lot of other creators who make similar content. So with all of those grievances aired out, yes, I have a negative perception of a lot of true crime content creators that exist today, but They are not all bad, and I'm going to give you a list of some of my other favorites, which probably won't come as a surprise to you because I've talked about them before, and many of you have even talked to me about them. The people who are the best, or who are considered the best and are highly regarded, are often viewed that way for a reason. Not always. We know that. We definitely know that that's not always the case. But in this instance, I think there's some truth to it. These are some of people's favorites because they're just good at what they do. So number one, we gotta put her at the top. She is incredible at what she does. Stephanie Harlow. If you have watched any of her videos, you know the amount of time and effort that goes into compiling all of her notes, getting her resources together, and producing her videos. She's amazing. She is incredible. And you know that whatever she's telling you can be backed up by facts. Number two, y'all already know, I love her, Bailey Sarian. She does not solely focus on true crime content, but she is an incredible storyteller, and from what I have seen, she does a good job doing her research and keeping you really engaged. And I feel like she does have a heart for people who have gone through these types of things. Obviously, like, she's not sitting on camera crying. Not that there would be anything wrong with it, but you know that she sees the people that she's talking about as people and not just names on a piece of paper. And she even recently kind of retooled her scheduling because she said, like, mentally, I can't do this every week, which is how you know that researching these cases does have an impact on her. Number three, Danielle Hallen. I think I've watched her the longest and the most consistently. And again, research, incredible, on point. But not only that, her heart is so for the victims, and you can tell in the way that she talks about them, in the way that she presents stories, and the kinds of stories that she covers on her channel. I think she has probably one of the biggest hearts. She really loves to focus on, bringing missing people home, telling stories about people who have gone missing and haven't been found yet, and raising awareness for their cases and getting more people to learn about cases that are not as well known. So that way, hopefully, her thing is like, somebody knows something. Someone saw something that happened in this case. Somebody must have seen this person. If we can get these stories out there, we can hopefully get either someone brought home to safety or get closure for the families because somebody knows something. And the last one is a podcast. Stephanie, Bailey, and Danielle all have YouTube channels. Obviously, I recommend Last Podcast on the Left, and I'm also recommending Crime After Crime. This is hosted by Danielle Hallen and John Lorden, and I wouldn't necessarily describe this or categorize this as a comedy true crime podcast, but obviously they talk about true crime cases. They'll each pick one under like the same kind of crime, where it's like Craigslist crimes or Florida crimes. And so they're not talking about things that are super deep and dark. You're not gonna like cry listening to the podcast. They're just talking about other true crime stories that you might not be able to have access to as much information on, and so they fit better in a format where one tells their story and then the other tells theirs, and I think they do a great job at what they do. Obviously, the list is pretty short. I have essentially gutted my subscription box because there are some people who I don't listen to and I can't support, and it kind of bothers me to see their content pop up on my feed. So that's my list. I would love to hear your thoughts on everything that we talked about in this video. Do you agree with my criticisms? Do you think I'm taking it too seriously? Who are some of your favorite true crime content creators? As always, I love to hear your opinions down below, and while you are telling me what you think, if you would consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel, that would be incredible. even if you're not leaving a comment, liking the video really does a lot to help me, and so I would appreciate it if you liked it, if you would leave a like on there. And if you're subscribed to me already, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of you. I love being able to just sit here, hang out, and talk about whatever. And with all that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for watching. Please be kind to people, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.